Colossal is like a second restricted, the way that it can do such devastating power, and particularly against Pokemon like Venusaur and like the Charizard on that opposing side, that could be a really strong threat. So if it's alright with you, Lee, I think we should jump right into game one. I'm very excited to see what the rest of this European losers bracket has to offer. So let's jump right into the action here. On the right hand side of your screen, you can see the Groudon and the Venusaur coming out here into the action with Dragapult and Colossal for Antonio.
Yeah, a really nice lead here for the Antonio with the Dragapult and Colossal. Got that option to go for potentially a Surf, activate the steam engine, but the one thing that Rafael's done to kind of counteract that is lead with his Venusaur that has got that chlorophyll ability that can shut down opposing threats like the Dragapult with Sleep Powder, or the Colossal as well, or even go for a big attack. The other option that Rafael's got sitting on the field right now, which is a great option against something like the Colossal, is the Groudon. If that decides to max and go for Max Quake, it's going to make easy work of Colossal.
Yeah, Colossal saying, you're not going to make easy work of me, I'm going to come out and it's going to be the Incineroar. It's going to be able to throw down a nice Intimidate against that Groudon. Of course, a Max Quake still will deal a decent amount of damage, but at least getting an Intimidate there does help out the Colossal a little bit later on. Venusaur, however, going to go for the Sleep Powder, but Dragapult able to avoid, go for a Will-O-Wisp, and also avoid. So not a lot of accuracy going on here in turn one. Groudon, however, capitalizing on this immensely and goes for that Swords Dance.
Wow, getting the Sword Stance off there and kind of avoiding the Will-O-Wisp is a huge turn for Rafael, you know. It puts him in a great position going into this next turn where the Groudon can now choose to go for the Max Quake if it wants. But you've got to be aware, if you do go for that play, you're still going to be susceptible to another Will-O-Wisp. You do have Fake Out pressure from the Incineroar now that Antonio's got on the field. It can prevent that Sleep Powder on the Venusaur for at least one turn. So maybe you want to preserve your Groudon from the Will-O-Wisp, preserve your Venusaur if you're able to, and get around this Fake Out this next turn before you kind of unleash the Groudon onto the field.
And of course, the Incineroar switching in there, we were able to see that it is carrying these safety goggles there for Antonio. So it is a very nice switch in if potentially the Venusaur was trying to put that Colossal to sleep. But we're going to see a Dynamax come out here straight away. It is indeed going to be that Groudon. So even though it's taken the Intimidate, it then got its Sword Stance up. It's at +1. It's going to be in a really formidable position here. And as long as it doesn't take something like that Will-O-Wisp, it's going to be able to deal some destruction out there on the field. We're going to see Incineroar going for that Fake Out into the Venusaur, making sure it cannot go for a Sleep Powder into the opposing Dragapult here. Dragapult going to go actually straight away for a Breaking Swipe. So going to connect on both the opposing Pokemon on Rafael's side. Lower the attack back down to neutral for the Groudon. Venusaur not going to mind the attack drop, but certainly isn't going to appreciate the damage. Groudon going to go straight away for this Max Quake. Going to connect down into that Incineroar, wants to remove it from the field, and it does in a very clean one-hit KO there.
Yeah, it's a really nice option there from Antonio not to risk the Will-O-Wisp missing again and just going for that bit more of a reliable Breaking Swipe to, like you mentioned, reset that the Sword Stance boot that the Groudon's already got. But the thing is, picking up the knockout onto the Incineroar there and in turn giving yourself and the Venusaur a special defensive boost at the same time makes it even easier to deal with something like the Colossal that we already know is in the back for Antonio, making it very difficult for him to actually bring that in and utilize it in front of these two Pokemon. The Fake Out's now gone from the Incineroar. You have access to your Sleep Powder that you can throw onto the Dragapult this next turn. You know that the safety goggles was on the Incineroar, so you're going to be pretty safe going for that there, unless you do check the team sheet. And as you can see here, the Dragapult is in an alright position because of the Lumberry, so it's not as straightforward as that. Do you want to risk another Will-O-Wisp here, or do you maybe want to try and get your Colossal set up? That's the other option there for Antonio.
But that's the thing, even with the Lumberry, sure, you're safe for one turn, but it is literally a sort of a one-turn item. Venusaur, if it's allowed to stay in on the field, is going to be able to go for that Sleep Powder again. So Dragapult needs to make sure it's making the most of the fact that it does have access to something like its Lumberry there to be able to then try and remove the Venusaur from the field. And Colossal joining here, we know that that's not carrying any of those sleep-preventing items, so it could be potentially a target for that Venusaur to put to sleep. If you're Rafael, you're going to know that it is going to be a threatening Pokemon. We cannot ever underestimate Colossal here in the Players' Cup, and it could be the target down for that Venusaur. So Antonio deciding to Dynamax it up here, but it's going to be interesting to see whether he locks into maybe a more defensive play, going for something like a Max Guard, allowing potentially your Dragapult to try and pick up the KO against the Venusaur, just so you can breathe a little bit easier. Or maybe Antonio wants to go straight away for something like that Surf play and activate up the Colossal.
Yeah, I think you make a good point with the Sleep Powder onto the Colossal, alternatively not going into the Dragapult here. And that's exactly what we see, you know, and the nice play with the Max Guard as well, while we see another Breaking Swipe. Antonio going for the more, you know, accurate move, not wanting to take risks, putting that Groudon now down to -1, which makes it more difficult for the Groudon to actually do good damage to both the Dragapult and the Colossal. And there's always a threat if you go for the Max Quake into the Colossal here, then you can potentially activate a weakness policy. So the Lumberry on the Dragapult, a really nice option choice, because it's really making life difficult for the Venusaur. Where does it decide to go? Of course, it can go for the Sleep Powder again into the Colossal this turn, but there is a chance that it also misses, like we've already seen the Will-O-Wisp from Antonio's side in this game already.
Yeah, it can always be heartbreak when those things occur, but I think you can see the Breaking Swipes really starting to counteract the damage output on the ground, and this is where things now get a little bit interesting. The Venusaur, like you said, can easily go for that Sleep Powder into the Colossal. There isn't really an option here for Antonio to be able to protect it from that, as Venusaur is able to stay in on the field. The Breaking Swipe not being able to alleviate Venusaur, but like you said, you could potentially get that miss, and that could be the window of opportunity that Colossal needs to be able to do some big damage. But Venusaur actually deciding to go straight for a Leaf Storm here, just opting with that lovely critical hit to deal over 50% damage to the Colossal. If that was not in Dynamax, that would have been the nice solid KO. Dragapult sticking with the Breaking Swipe though, and I think this has been really well played. Groudon's in its Dynamax form, and the Dynamax turns really have not been able to be sort of used to their full potential here. The damage output really is quite weak, and you don't always want to switch out your Dynamax Pokemon to reset that. Does, however, go for that Max Quake, and it is going to be enough to pick up a KO on the Colossal. Amazing double up here from Rafael, just being able to know that, you know, the attack drops are coming onto my Groudon. Venusaur actually, don't even go for the Sleep Powder, you could miss. Let's just make sure that we remove this Colossal before it's able to do anything at all.
Yeah, the critical hit there from the Leaf Storm might have been really, really key in that particular turn, and just kind of tipping the damage over the edge for the Groudon to pick up the knockout, especially after that second Breaking Swipe, putting Groudon down to -2 attack. And the Venusaur now still, like you said earlier, it's still sitting on the field, so it's getting additional turns than you kind of really would like it to if you were Antonio. Going to have another opportunity to put something to sleep here if it decides to, or maybe even switch out for later on in this game. If you can kind of manipulate and keep the sun up on the field, it could be useful in the late game to maybe come in against the Zacian that has just hit the field for Antonio. Obviously getting the Intrepid Sword boost, and it is going to be quite threatening, but can't ignore something like the Groudon either this turn.
Yeah, and although it looks like Venusaur's time is limited on the field, you can see those sun turns are starting to tick away, and Groudon has the opportunity now to maybe switch out so it can reset the sun a little bit later on if something like the Charizard is maybe waiting in the back. Groudon obviously wants to reset those attack drops as well, so you can see from Antonio's perspective, it doesn't have the switch ability that Raphael has, so really has to make sure that they're taking every single second here to calculate what Raphael's going to do and try and maybe catch Pokemon on the switch in. It's going to be Grimmsnarl actually joining the field for that Groudon that's going to have a little bit of rest in the back. Venusaur going to go for that Sleep Powder, and this time it does find its marks, able to KO down onto these Ashen, and that Grimmsnarl is going to be able to breathe a little bit of a sigh of relief knowing that those Behemoth Blades are not going to be connecting onto it in this turn. Grimmsnarl as well being able to avoid out of the way of the damage here coming out from the Dragapult, and Venusaur, however, will be KO'd, but I think Venusaur's done a lot of work in this game one so far.
Yeah, definitely. You know, putting the Zacian to sleep as well in this last turn is just such a key turn. The one Sleep Powder you want to hit in this entire game is that one, just because it takes it out of complete play here and allows the Grimmsnarl onto the field, so you can utilize potentially those screens this next turn, which just gives something like the Groudon that we know is in the back for Raphael just the longevity to come in and be able to just hit those Precipice Blades, because a couple of Precipice Blades, even -1 after a Breaking Swipe, will be enough to probably get rid of both the Dragapult and the Zacian.
Yeah, Regieleki going to come in here for Raphael as well, and this is where the speed statistics can start to be manipulated, particularly if Zacian is taking a nap. It's not going to be in a position to maybe retaliate, so it can take maybe 1 or even 2 potential Electro Webs here. Grimmsnarl going to help out by building up their attack to boost up the defenses on the opposing side of the field, but Regieleki not going for any speed options here, just going for the straight up Thunderbolt into Dragapult, but it is not enough to pick up the KO. Dragapult able to go for that Breaking Swipe, of course not going to be able to affect the Grimmsnarl as it is Fairy type and that is a Dragon type move. Regieleki is going to take a decent chunk of damage, and Zacian critically actually being able to wake up, goes for the Sacred Sword connecting into that Regieleki, but Regieleki phenomenal, able to hang on.
Yeah, you see how like important the Reflect was there from the Grimmsnarl, just allowing the Regieleki just this one more turn to be able to get damage onto this Dragapult, remove it from the field, remove that Breaking Swipe threat, remove the Will-O-Wisp threat to the Groudon to allow it to kind of come in and really make easy-ish work of the Zacian. Of course, the Zacian's still going to cause a threat. It's going to be able to potentially pick up a knockout onto the Grimmsnarl this turn, but you know, it's difficult because the Scary Face now coming out and making things even more difficult for the Zacian. Going to be down to -2 now, which makes dealing with the Groudon potentially that's going to come in even more of a difficult task.
I love the synergy between Regieleki and Grimmsnarl both being able to manipulate speed here. It frees up the Regieleki to target down the Dragapult to pick up the KO, allowing the Zacian to have to take that Scary Face and have its speed reduced. And this does allow Rafael, now that the Regieleki has been KO'd, to bring the Groudon in from the back. And we know the Groudon, as long as it's able to hit its Precipice Blades, will be able to deal with the Zacian in pretty swift style.
Yeah, and another Scary Face here. I'll just guarantee that depending on how this Groudon speeds that lies, you know, it's going to then be able to get the Precipice Blades onto the Zacian. And I think now, without, you know, the attack drops, Groudon's going to be able to probably pick up the knockout onto the Zacian, depending on how it's been trained. But the game is coming to a very close end, depending on what Antonio decides to do. Maybe a critical hit here could save him, but I think the Scary Face Precipice Blades are going to be a little bit too much.
Well, the Precipice Blades does find its mark and picks up the very solid one-hit KO there against the Zacian, meaning that Rafael is going to be able to take this game 1, finally putting a stop to this Colossal.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I was thinking.
Position, things can really change up. So I think we should jump right into game 2, Lee, and see exactly how these two are going to come down against each other. Remember, they are in the losers bracket as well, so the winner will continue on in the competition, and the loser will unfortunately be knocked out, and their Players' Cup journey will end here. Regieleki and Groudon are out on the field though for Rafael, and Dragapult and Incineroar are the leads for Antonio.
Yeah, a bit more of a pragmatic lead here from Antonio, not wanting to bring that Colossal straight up. And I think it's a sensible option because it gives you the opportunity to really concentrate a little bit more down onto the Groudon, because I think that is the Pokemon that you've got to really concentrate on if you are Antonio before you kind of unleash your Colossal onto the board, because once you either burn the Groudon or you kind of are able to remove it from play, then things get a lot easier. Then there's not really that direct threat to Colossal like we saw in that game 1. So, you know, at the same time, Rafael's got to be aware that there is obviously something like Will-O-Wisp or Breaking Swipe that could come out. So maybe there is a switch there from the Groudon. Rafael maybe going to be able to take advantage of that and then do something himself to preserve the Groudon for the late game and keep it in reserve for when that Colossal does eventually hit the field.
Yeah, and I think the Dynamax options here are going to be interesting as well. Across both of our players, they've got so many different options to kind of utilize, and that could be the critical kind of pivot here in the game. Groudon, however, on Rafael's side wants to reset that Intimidate. No Swords Dances here at the moment. Is going to bring in the Grimmsnarl again. A good choice here because we know that it doesn't get affected by the breaking swipes. And actually, it's kind of a similar beginning to game 2 as how the end of game 1 looked in terms of the Pokemon. But Regieleki getting in on out there, doesn't want to just go for those electric type moves into the opposing Dragapult here, deciding to Volt Switch off the field. And actually, a lovely play here by Rafael, being able to seamlessly bring that Groudon back in without having taken the Intimidate. However, the Breaking Swipe is going to be able to connect onto the Groudon and will do that little bit of chip and critically kind of reinstall that Intimidate, putting it at -1. Incineroar as well, going to go for the parting shot. That's going to go into that Grimmsnarl. The one thing it does do, however, is remove the Fake Out potential on the next turn. Sorry, it removes any kind of Fake Out. You can bring it back in and then start applying it a little bit later on. But interesting to see it didn't utilize it in this particular turn.
Yeah, and you know, just being a little bit precarious, I think, here, not wanting to dive in so quickly. And I think that it's understandable with how important this match is for both players. They've got to really kind of evaluate the board position and when they're going to utilize all these kind of powerhouse Pokemon that they've got access to. You know, when is the right time to bring the Colossal in for Antonio, and when's the right time to bring the Zacian in, and the same kind of goes for Rafael with the Groudon and the Venusaur. He's in a nice position now where he's got the Grimmsnarl on the field and he can potentially get the screen support up, but on the other hand, Antonio's got himself into a great position now where he can potentially go for that Surf, activate the Colossal's steam engine, weakness policy, and get some big damage onto the field. But the big question is, Lou, if you go for that, is it going to be enough to take down the Groudon? Probably not, especially with a light screen that can support it from that opposing Grimmsnarl.
That's the thing, Grimmsnarl in a really great position to start supporting up that Groudon, maybe even trying to get Groudon to utilize something like that Sword Stance opportunity before Rafael can lock into a Dynamax. But Antonio, of course, has the Colossal back out here on the field, and Rafael actually deciding to bring the Groudon back into its Pokeball in place of the Regieleki. This could be an opportunity here for the Colossal to maybe go for its Dynamax here, start setting up that residual damage with the Volcalith and dealing out some good damage in turn. Also, when it's paired up next to that Dragapult, I would not be surprised at all to see a cheeky Surf come into play here, and that will be all the Colossal needs to be able to activate up its weakness policy, its Steam Engine, and we're finally going to be able to see the full force of Colossal in this game.
Yeah, and it's an opportunity now where Antonio can actually go for that play and try and make some use out of it. But you've got to bear in mind that the Grimmsnarl provides so much good support for the Groudon in this situation. Like I mentioned, you've got to guarantee that you are picking the knockup against that Groudon, because it could decide to go for the max here as well. You know, the Dynamax turn. But not seeing that, Lou. You called it perfectly. We're going to see the Surf come out, activate that weakness policy. You know, the Surf not doing as much in the sun here, and the Colossal taking full advantage of the Steam Engine and the weakness policy there, and getting rid of that Regieleki that was such a disruption in the first game for Antonio.
Oh, Regieleki goes down so quickly, Lee. But it was actually a great play there by Antonio. Like you said, kind of capitalizing on the opportunity, going for the Surf. It also broke the focus sash on that opposing Regieleki, allowing the Max Flare to be able to pick up the KO there. And I like the play because if the Groudon had still stayed in, it allowed the Colossal to kind of capitalize on the fact that the sun's in the sky. It's going to be able to boost up its fire type moves with that damage as well, and that would deal a huge chunk to the opposing Groudon. Alternatively, you might be able to catch a nice Pokemon in on the switch, which is exactly what Antonio was able to do here. Now kind of limiting the Pokemon choices that Rafael has, but looks like he's going to bring in the Venusaur to also try and capitalize on the sunshine.
Yeah, and this is the other awkward kind of situation. Now the Venusaur hits the field again. We had this situation in game 1 where it was able to kind of pressure the Colossal, especially with that Sleep Powder. And in this situation, you haven't got your G-Max Volcalith kind of set up yet. You are going to be able to put that Colossal to sleep right here and kind of shut down any ability for it to function going forward, and at least with its Gigantamax turns for the rest of this match, potentially.
Yep, the Incineroar going to jump in on the action as well. Going to throw the Intimidate, but I think the critical thing here is you've got the Fake Out for the next turn. The Wise Max Guard here from the Colossal means that the Colossal's not going to have to take that Scary Face, not going to take a potential Sleep Powder like Venusaur has gone for here. And now that the Incineroar is on the field next to it, it can go for Fake Out in this next turn into the Venusaur, preventing another Sleep Powder. Alternatively, of course, Rafael could potentially try and Dynamax up the Venusaur, but then that means you also don't have to worry about Sleep Powder.
Yeah, and it's very difficult in front of 2 Fire-type Pokemon as well, and one with the Steam Engine. You're kind of relying heavily on that Grimmsnarl to get the Scary Face off, but now you can kind of prevent that with the Fake Out from Incineroar to prevent the Grimmsnarl from being able to utilize that, and then just target down the Venusaur with maybe something like the G-Max Volcalith. It might not be a bad play here to try and get that started, get the residual damage onto the field, and even if the Venusaur is sashed, then, you know, you're going to be able to at least remove it with the residual damage. But I think that might be a good way to start going in this match, because then with the sun up, even if the Groudon comes in late game, you've still got the ability to kind of capitalize on your kind of heat waves when you're not in that giant Gigantamax form.
Yeah, I think you're completely right there, Lee. And also, this is the last turn of Dynamax for that Colossal. So if you want to set up the residual damage with the G-Max Volcalith, now is literally the only time in this game too you're going to be able to do it. Venusaur does, however, Gigantamax up for Rafael. So going to be able to take these moves a little bit better, but instead going straight for the Max Guard, knowing that it wants to stall out that very final turn. The Fake Out goes straight into the slot, but depending on where Antonio has targeted, it may not be able to get off the residual effects of the move it's opted for. Reflectors come out from that opposing Grimmsnarl, and the Volcalith was indeed targeting down into that opposing Venusaur, so a phenomenal protect there from Rafael, really kind of putting Antonio's sort of heels in about this move. He kind of wasn't able to capitalize on the opportunity to set up the rocks or stop the Venusaur in its tracks.
Yeah, huge play there for Rafael, because just being able to deny that G-Max Volcalith this final turn is so huge, because the residual damage that we've seen so many times is one of the biggest assets that Gigantamax Colossal has, and being able to stop that, kind of preserve your health at the same time, and then kind of have access to this big threat in Venusaur with the Grimmsnarl support next to it with that Scary Face is such a good support option, and you're going to be able to put on a lot of pressure to everything on the field going into this next turn.
Colossal, however, able to find its mark on both Pokemon with that Heat Wave. Not enough to be able to pick up a KO though, and Venusaur able to go for the Max Ooze into Incineroar. Not picking up the KO either, but I think the critical thing here is boosting up that special attack. It makes it a little bit more of a formidable force going forward, but you still have to worry about this Colossal. If you're Grimmsnarl now, I would want to be trying to find a way to weaken this Colossal where possible. Spirit Break, however, is actually going to connect down into the Incineroar, not able to pick up the KO, lowering the special attack that really is kind of null and void on an Incineroar that's able to go for that passing shot. So really targeting down the Venusaur, reducing its output as well, going to reduce that special attack boost that it got from the Max Ooze and allow Antonio the opportunity to start pivoting Pokemon once again.
Yeah, it's a really nice play with the parting shot there. You think as well, maybe you missed an opportunity to get the Venusaur pick up the knockout there with a Flare Blitz potentially, but I think preserving Incineroar to later on this match probably gives you a few more options, as well as kind of giving you the Intimidate for the Groudon that we know is in the back for Rafael as well. He is thinking about what to bring in here, what would be the best option to bring in front of this Venusaur. The Colossal still in a good position though, you know, can fire off another Heat Wave this next turn, and the Venusaur definitely not in a position where it's going to be able to take that. You're going to have to utilize potentially that Scary Face here and hope that it is enough of a speed drop to allow the Venusaur then to get the jump onto the Colossal. But as you can see, the sun fading here is the worst thing for Rafael, so he kind of needs to get the Groudon onto the field now to get that Chlorophyll booster, but by doing that you're not going to be able to utilize the Scary Face with the Grimmsnarl, so it does become a bit of a tricky situation with the sun ending that last turn.
Yeah, decisions. Do you want the sun up or do you want to go for Scary Face? Both of them will have an impact, obviously, on Venusaur's potential here, but the fact that you're facing down against a Zacian that's a well-known speedy Pokemon, and Colossal as well with all of its boosts, Venusaur probably maybe needs the sun up so that it just at least is in that kind of driving seat when it comes to those speed tiers. But, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see what options Antonio's gone for, maybe trying to go for another one of those Heat Waves, trying to deal damage on both the opposing Pokemon. Scary Face does come out and actually connects down onto the Zacian here, so it's going to have its speed drop by 2 stages, and Colossal still outspeeding that Venusaur. Obviously, the sun has gone away, it goes for the Heat Wave, finds its mark, and even without the sun, it's able to do enough damage to pick up the solid KO against that Venusaur. It also does a significant amount of damage to the Grimmsnarl, really putting it in a precarious position, and let's be honest, Zacian, Behemoth Blade, it can do a lot of damage at the best of times, but to the slither of health remaining on the Grimmsnarl, what a turn of events there for Antonio.
Yeah, he's been able to kind of close this one out and just make it Groudon versus the world here. As I think Groudon, you know, we mentioned in that first game that it was a great answer for the Colossal, but I think with, you know, 3 other Pokemon and Colossal kind of staring down at you, it might be a little bit too difficult, especially because the Dragapult's still active in the back for Antonio. It can come in, can support with the breaking swipes, with the Will-O-Wisps and things like that, and you've still got Incineroar as well, which, you know, that parting shot, we already mentioned how kind of pivotal the parting shot was, rather than picking the knockup out onto the Venusaur to allow you that Intimidate support onto the Groudon, and it's exactly for this reason. And the Colossal, you know, set up in a position where it can get one of these Heat Waves off onto the Groudon as well, which is going to do big damage. The sun's up, is going to be boosting, and of course it has got that weakness policy activated already as well.
I mean, that's the thing, a Groudon facing down against a Colossal and a Zacian, having access to Precipice Blades, you might think that's actually a pretty good position. Even if Incineroar switches in, that's 1 Intimidate, Incineroar's really low health, I can pick up a KO. But the fact that Rafael doesn't have any option to switch out that Groudon, and like you mentioned, Lee, you've got Incineroar, you've got the breaking swipes coming out from that Dragapult when it's able to join the field, it really does just mean that this poor Groudon has got a very uphill struggle to climb. Colossal is also going to be able to utilize the fact that the sun is in the sky and go for that Solar Beam. Such a powerful grass type attack. Normally, of course, takes 2 turns of charge, but in the sun, it only takes 1. It can boost up that sunshine and go for a big amount of damage into that Groudon. Not enough to pick up a KO, but any other moves coming out into it are going to be able to pick up the damage. And I think the critical thing here is we know that that Colossal outspeeds. We know that it can just go for another Solar Beam in this next turn. That Swords Dance isn't going to help Groudon out, unfortunately, for Rafael.
No, definitely not. And the amount of damage there is just far too much, and it just sets up, even if the worst case scenario happens here and the Colossal somehow goes down with the Incineroar, it sets up perfectly for the Dragapult or the Zacian to kind of come in and be able to pick up the knockout onto the Groudon with so low health. The Sword Stance, a nice idea from Rafael, but I think if you weren't really expecting that much damage, it maybe would have been the one thing that could kind of pull you back in this game. But unfortunately, just taking that much damage this last turn was probably just a little bit too much. And a great match there from Antonio, and showing how the Colossal can kind of contend with the Groudon there.
Yeah, I think threatening the attack stat of that Groudon was key. So let's jump into game 3 and see exactly how Groudon is going to be able to dodge out of the way those Intimidates and Breaking Swipes, and maybe try and get itself in a position where it can deal out the devastation we know it's capable of. It's going to be Regieleki coming out on the field, paired up with Umbreon this time for Rafael, and Dragapult and Incineroar, the leads out for Antonio.
Yeah, it's really nice to see the Umbreon inclusion here. I think it's a nice answer for the Dragapult in particular, because it can go for foul play if it wants to into the Dragapult. And if you remove the Dragapult from the field, then Groudon has a much easier time in this match. You know, you're identifying as you've gone through this set things that are giving you a lot of issues. The Dragapult definitely one of those for Rafael, because the Groudon doesn't have as much freedom as long as the breaking swipe, as long as the Will-O-Wisp are kind of in play. So if you've got a Pokemon to be able to remove that as quick as possible, it makes things a lot easier for Groudon to kind of come in and really be able to be super effective here.
Well, Regieleki jumping right onto the offensive with the Thunderbolt into that Dragapult. Like you said, Dragapult gave Rafael a lot of problems, particularly with that Will-O-Wisp that manages to find the mark onto the opposing Umbreon. Umbreon able to retaliate with the foul play, but it's not going to be enough to pick up the KO. Dragapult's going to be here to stay into the next turn. Incineroar, however, is not around today. It's going for that parting shot into the opposing Regieleki and will return to Antonio, allowing him to be able to pivot up the position a little bit. This could be the opportunity to bring in something like the Colossal, go for that Surf, and maybe get it set up, but you have to still worry about a potential yawn coming out from that opposing Umbreon.
Yeah, that's the other thing to consider in this match as well. You know, the Umbreon not there just putting out offensive pressure to the Dragapult. And it was really key how much damage that foul play did. The Will-O-Wisp, a nice call here from Antonio, but obviously reducing that damage. But it's still in range to go down from a Thunderbolt from this Regieleki in the next turn. And like we were saying, once the Dragapult kind of leaves the field, the Groudon has kind of like a bit of a free time almost. So it's kind of important to maybe preserve the Dragapult for later on if you can. Avoid getting knocked out, but at the same time it's kind of difficult doing that without taking too much residual damage, and you've got to consider, like you've just mentioned, Lou, the threat of yawn here from the Umbreon. But it's a good time to bring in Zacian because you can potentially get a sub up, you can potentially avoid that yawn and get Zacian in a nice spot going forward in this match.
And of course, with Umbreon being the difficult Pokemon that it is, Zacian having access to you know, things like Sacred Sword, it can start dealing some damage to that opposing Umbreon, even with the sort of Bane with Blades and things like that as well. It can deal some good damage, maybe try and catch something on the switch in as well and just prevent those yawns from really being a factor. The Dragapult as well really wants to maybe try and catch a Groudon switch in, but you have to watch out for Regieleki. Being the speediest thing here, it's easily going to be able to KO that Dragapult with something like a Thunderbolt.
Yeah, and that's the problem here. I think you might want to try and switch in maybe something like Incineroar. And if you do that, you can maybe protect Zacian for his turn, and it does then give you the opportunity to utilize Fake Out, get a substitute up, and go from there. But yeah, you don't want to lose Dragapult too freely, like you kind of... Oh, it's just hung on. 2 HP. That is enough as the Regieleki goes out and on the Volt Switch. So the Dragapult going to be able to hang on and get at least one more turn out for Antonio here.
Oh, amazing there by the Dragapult, just able to hang on with a slither of HP. Regieleki just pivoting in on out allows Rafael the opportunity to obviously bring in a Pokemon from the back, maybe to apply a little bit more pressure to something like the Zacian here, but instead gonna be that Grimmsnarl. Going to be able to take those breaking swipes a little bit better, but it has to worry about something coming out from the opposing Zacian here. We actually see from the Dragapult the light screen coming up here, so just protecting from any of those special type attacks, potentially from the Venusaur a little bit later on. The Zacian, however, connecting down onto Umbreon again. No one really finding their mark here with the KOs. Umbreon comfortably taking that, able to activate its berry as well, and retaliate with that foul play. So even though Dragapult was able to hang on, it goes straight down to the foul play. But in a way that's nice, because if the Dragapult had gone down, then Zacian would have taken that foul play as redirection.
Yeah, that's it. You know, the Zacian play there was really nice, but the unfortunate thing is here that we've already kind of outlined for Antonio is losing that Dragapult. Kind of the way to also not only set up your own Colossal, but kind of keep the Groudon, the opposing Groudon in check, which potentially we haven't seen yet from Rafael, so he may not have brought it, but you've got to imagine that he has brought it to this game, but doing a really good job to get rid of that early on here. And like if the Groudon is there, making life a lot easier for it when it does come onto the field.
Yeah, exactly. And this is where things get interesting now. If you are Antonio, thinking about which Pokemon you want to bring in, you can see that clock ticking down. Every single second counts here. Remember, the loser of this match will be knocked out of the competition, so everything is here to play with. And it looks like they've opted to bring in that Incineroar to throw down and intimidate here. Yeah,
the Incineroar coming in with the Fake Out support definitely kind of... It stops the Grimmsnarl from being able to be so disruptive here, and the Zacian going to be able to go for an attack into the Umbreon this turn and remove it from the field, and another kind of supporting option it's disruptive, isn't it, to your opponent, but got to be aware that the Colossal can come in at the back. You know, if it does come in, there is the option for Antonio to go for something like a Flare Blitz here and maybe activate just the Steam Engine, but we're not going to see that. Also going to come in place of the Incineroar, and it's probably a good option for it to come in here, Lou. I think, you know, that the Grimmsnarl's tied up with using Reflect, and the Umbreon, you know, what's it really going to do in front of the Zacian that's going to be able to remove it from the field quite easily with that Sacred Sword this turn.
Yeah, unfortunately, not a lot it can do to stop the damage coming down there. And additionally, as well, if it's got that burn chip that's going to be affecting as well, even if it was able to hang on with sort of 1 or 2 HP, it's already eaten its berry. That is the last thing it needs, is the little HP damage from the burn. But this is when now things things get a little bit more interesting. Raphael's able to now bring the Groudon into the fray, and Groudon, we know, has been able to counteract that Colossal in the previous game 1. And a Precipice Blades here is something that the Zacian as well really doesn't want to take.
No, definitely not. You know, the Groudon coming in here is really nice for Rafael in particular, because it puts a lot of pressure onto the Colossal that hasn't got the option to have that Steam Engine or the weakness policy activated with the Steam Engine kind of in conjunction there. And the Zacian not going to be as effective, especially with that Reflect now set up from the Grimmsnarl. The Groudon going to be able to take attacks a lot better going into this next turn. So, and it's quite free here to potentially just throw out a Max Quake onto either target. Both of them are weak to the Max Quake, and even Incineroar coming in from the back, it will be able to get an Intimidate onto the Groudon, but again, it's still going to take a lot of damage from the Groudon and kind of in turn for that.
That's the thing, Groudon and Dynamax, it can afford to maybe just take one Intimidate there. It's still going to be able to deal out formidable pressure with those max moves. It's when they start to stack up, or maybe if you throw a cheeky burn in there, that Groudon really does kind of get rendered useless in its Dynamax form. But we are indeed going to see the Dynamax come out here from Raphael. I believe it is going to be that Groudon, so it can start applying pressure and maybe try and stop this Colossal in its tracks before it's able to do the destruction that we saw happen in Game 2. Dynamax Groudon here obviously being able to apply pressure with those Max Quakes, and critically as well with the Max Quakes, you can boost up your special defense. That's something that's going to put you in really good stead against a special attacker like the Colossal.
Yeah, definitely. And, you know, Colossal at a point now where is the Intimidate going to be enough to really support it and allow it to have that weakness policy activated? Because if it is, then maybe there is going to be a chance to get the Groudon. But again, you've got to worry about the support that the Grimmsnarl can provide here. And it is really going to be the kind of the perfect storm here for us, Lou, to decide which is going to be king. Is it going to be the Colossal, or is it going to be that Groudon?
Oh, time will tell. The Max Quake goes into the Max Guard, however, of the Colossal, so defensive play going around here, and Grimmsnarl going for that Spirit Break to try and reduce the offensive pressure of the Colossal even more, but to no avail whatsoever. So this first turn of Dynamax, not really doing a lot, Lee.
No, not really at all. And I think the one thing that makes it very difficult to utilize Colossal in this situation is you kind of want to go for that G-Max Volcalith whenever you can, its signature attack. But against the Groudon, it's not really a kind of preferable play, because in these situations you want to hit it with the Max Flare or the Max Overgrowth to really maximize your damage onto that Pokemon. So it kind of gets away from the ability to utilize the G-Max Volcalith as well. But you do have Zacian in the back, so it could always be an option. Get that residual damage kind of chipping away now, and then later on Zacian can come in and hopefully do enough to clean up.
Grimmsnarl setting up the light screen as well, so the Raphael side will be better equipped to deal with these special type attacks coming in their direction. Groudon, however, is going to be able to go for the Max Quake, and this time connects down onto that opposing Incineroar. Not enough to pick up a KO though. You can see that Intimidate really actually paying off for Antonio, and the Incineroar just able to hang on here, but of course the boost still going to happen up on Raphael's side of the field. Colossal taking advantage of the sun in the sky, going for that Max Flare, connecting into the Groudon, but you can see the pitiful amount of damage that it is doing thanks to all the defensive measures that Raphael has put into place. Antonio, however, going to be showing off that cheeky thing I think we saw in one of his previous matches, going for that self-activation of the Steam Engine with the Incineroar. Does very little damage, but now it does put Colossal in the speedier driving seat.
Yeah, definitely, and it gives it the opportunity now to go for the G-Max Volcalith, knowing that you can see how much damage your Max Flare's doing to the Groudon, especially after the Max Quake boost and the light screen kind of stacking on top of each other. You're not getting the damage return you need, so you may as well go for the G-Max Volcalith into something like the Grimmsnarl, get damage onto that side of the field, and then start that residual damage and try and set a game up for maybe Zacian to come in at the end game for Antonio to clean up, like we mentioned in that last turn. But Groudon in a phenomenal spot here for Raphael, you know, set himself up perfectly here, and not on any threat at all going into this next turn.
And that speed change being showcased here. Going first is the Colossal with that G-Max Volcalith. Not dealing a lot of damage to the Grimmsnarl thanks to the light screen in play and obviously that special defense boost it got, but it still will allow those rocks to come into effect. It's another Max Quake, however. This time Incineroar not going to be so lucky and will be KO'd. And again, another special attack boost on the side for Raphael. And this puts him in such a great position, because even if by some way the Colossal was able to get a boost up, it just puts you in a really protective way, particularly for towards the end game of this match. Combine it with that Spirit Break, you are lowering the offensive pressure of this Colossal, and it just means that you don't have to worry about it so much. It allows Raphael the opportunity to maybe focus more on the Zacian when it returns to the field, so that can be your sort of main target and concern to deal with.
Yeah, and I think it has to be at this point. We've already seen the G-Max, the Colossal, not really be that effective against either the Grimmsnarl or the Groudon. But Zacian's not going to have it like an easy time, you know. We'll come in and we'll pressure a lot with the Behemoth Blade. The Intrepid Sword is kind of going to be, you're going to be able to activate that quite freely, and you're going to be able to do big damage to the Groudon. But you've got to remember that there is a Reflect still active on the field, so the Groudon going to be able to get at least one attack into the Zacian, and I'd imagine it probably will be able to take it. The Groudon is -1 at the moment, so it does make it difficult, but the Colossal in not the best spots, but the Precipice Blades making a big game change here for the Groudon not needing to decide which target to go for and just deciding to click that one button. And you can't forget that it does have access to something like Swords Dance, so you can't give it room to allow it to go for that Swords Dance, because if you do, then it really is an end game for Antonio. So keeping on the pressure with Zacian and hoping you can take a Precipice Blades and remove the Grimmsnarl at the same time is going to be trying to kind of what you're trying to do.
Colossal just going straight for the Protector, and Grimmsnarl going for the Scary Face, finding its mark there on the Zacian. I think this is great synergy coming out from Rafael's side. You need to lower the speed of that Zacian so that the Precipice Blades is going to be able to come out first, and it is able to connect onto that opposing Zacian, but let's see how much the Intimidate has paid off. It's going to be able to pick up a KO on the next hit, but let's see how much Behemoth Blade is able to do first and foremost. Maybe something like a critical hit could change things up here. Groudon, however, easily going to be able to take that. No critical hit going to be able to change things up. The residual damage, however, is going to start chipping away, and that's a calculation that both players have to be aware of. If Antonio can play things defensively enough, it could be what is needed to maybe try and pick up a KO against that Groudon.
Yeah, and you've got to keep in mind as well that the residual damage there onto the Groudon really quite pivotal for Antonio, because the Colossal does still have its Steam Engine activated and the Sun's still present on the field. You're going to be able to maybe go for a Heat Wave. Is it enough to get the Groudon? Probably not with the special defense boost that the Groudon's got and the light screen that's in effect. But the Scary Face, you can't forget about how useful that is, just to make sure that the Zacian cannot be as effective as it once was. So I think if you're Rafael, you're kind of banking on the Colossal not being able to knock out the Groudon, and then the Groudon being able to kind of clear the field with a Precipice Blades.
Well, Colossal actually trying to go for the double protect there to no avail. Zacian able to dodge though the Precipice Blade, so it's only going to find its mark down on that exposed Colossal. Will be able to pick up the KO, but Zacian is still in a great position here to deal some good damage in return for Antonio. Going straight for that Behemoth Blade, going to be able to connect down across the battlefield onto that opposing Groudon, and this will be enough to remove it from play, meaning that Rafael now only has the Regieleki and the Grimmsnarl here on the battlefield. And of course you can still go for those Scary Faces to try and lower the speed. You can go for the Spirit Break here for a little bit of chip damage, but I'm not sure, as much as I love Regieleki, I'm not sure it has the offensive pressure here against a Zacian to be able to pick up a KO.
I don't know, you might be underestimating your favorite little Regieleki here. I think if it comes in, it's going to be able to come in and maybe it's going to be very close, you know, Lou. It's going to be very close to picking up the knockout, but the Precipice Blades miss. They're really unfortunate for Rafael, but what you got to keep in mind is this Regieleki is full health. It's coming in fully powered, and it's going to be able to do some good work here, at least get a couple of attacks off depending on its item, and if it does have an item boosting move, then that just gives it that extra bit of power that it probably does need for the Zacian. So yeah, I don't know if Zacian can survive the Regieleki here. It has to pick up the knockout to really take the game.
Well, Regieleki going for that Thunderbolt, and I completely forgot, Lee, it does have the Focus Sash, so it's going to be able to take any move that Zacian throws out to it and survive. Zacian actually able to hang on, but Grimmsnarl following up with the Spirit Break, able to take down the Zacian, meaning that Rafael is able to take this game 3 and will remain in the competition. Phenomenal endgame there. You know, the Regieleki coming in. I can't believe I did this to Regieleki. How could I? But I forgot it still had its Focus Sash intact. I thought it had already been broken, but my mistake. I apologize, Regieleki. And what an amazing...